In this part of our photography review show, we're going to be looking at landscape and macro photography. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show, where we're looking at your photos and judging them and critiquing them based on the technical part, artistic part, and photo editing part. For those who don't know me, my name is Jacob Bors. I'm a professional photographer based in south of England in UK, and I've been photographing for over 15 years. I have 3 different photography businesses, and I've been reviewing photos for quite some time now. So hopefully this will help you to push your boundaries forward, to step up your level when it comes to photography, or simply just find out that your photos are amazing. So thankfully, after the last week episode, we found out many great comments, and we received over 150 photos. Now, these 150 photos were coming from 27 different photographers, and as we only have a limited time we can do this show, we decided to pick the 2 best photos for each of the photographer. That's if you send us more than 2 pictures, and we're gonna review them. And also to make sure that we kind of divide it equally and that everybody has a chance to find themselves, we decided to divide the show between 3 parts. First one between the landscape and macro photography. Second one between the mix photography and travel photography, and finally one between the animal photography and portrait photography. So this is just to make it easy, and let's start right now. Okay, so that's that out of the way. We are here in Lightroom and we are ready to review the landscape and macro photographers. So I have them ready here, and we start straight from the David Drake. So I have 2 pictures here, 2 different kind of things. One incredible landscape right here, and then the horses. So let's start. In general, there are 2 very different approaches. Looking at the landscape, you see kind of saturated, colorful, dramatic scene with very strong reflection and very strong composition. The second one, a little bit more kind of minimal view with the different crops. So from the technical part, looking at the landscape, everything seems to be very sharp. I like the exposure. Obviously, you use very nice natural lighting. The colors, everything works well for me. That looks all good. Then moving on the horses, they are nice and sharp, so great capture. The exposure is great. The focal length, nice as well. The horses are nicely in focus, and then the background is kind of blurry. So on a technical part, well done there. Then moving on the actual artistic part. So looking at this picture right here and thinking about the composition, obviously I'm a big fan of reflection. So using reflection is really strong composition rule and something which can work very well, and it works great here. When it comes to subject, obviously the mountains with the super clear water works really well here as well. One thing I would say about the choice of the day, which is not always in our hands, so I completely understand, but obviously if there would be some clouds here, it would take the picture and bring it even level higher, simply because I'm not a big fan of just kind of big blue spaces or gradients. I think they make the photo just a little bit more boring, but it's not a big deal. I understand that we cannot be everywhere at the best time, but still, if you could do it a little better, it would be the sky I would be looking at. I really like also that you use some of the stones as a foreground. So in general, really the composition is very strong because you have your foreground, middle ground, background, and it really works very well here. So well done on that. Looking at the horses, I think when it comes to this picture, probably the technical part is better than the artistic part, simply because sometimes when we photograph something like this as a photographers, we much more focus on making sure that we have the horses right and they are sharp, and that our shutter speed is well, and that everything is kind of the parts we want to be blurry at the background works very well and everything. And this is why sometimes when we photographing scene like this, it's a little bit difficult to balance than the artistic part. When we talking about sunset, sunrise, message, about the crop and so on, I think you've still done very well. It's just when I put these 2 pictures next to each other, I am amazed and wowed much more by this one when it comes to the artistic feel, and when it comes to something I would put on the wall home. The second one, little bit less, simply because it's technically perfect. It's just if there would be something more interesting, maybe a bit more space where the horse is running, especially when you see them running, you kind of want to enjoy the feeling of them running and running into the space and the space around them and the freedom of the horses. So that's just me. First part, when it comes to artistic, perfect. Second part, perfectly well. Everything is there, but the first one is just a little bit better. When it comes to post-processing, just one thing I was thinking about the crop here. When I use reflection, and especially in these kind of scenes, I prefer to put the reflection exactly in halfway of the picture, so right in the middle. So I would just shift it a little bit. Other than that, it looks all good to me. The highlights, the white balance, everything looks natural. I really like the fact that you managed to keep the white white. Sometimes with the snow it's a bit tricky, they can turn to blue and other colors, so I think you've done very well here. Nothing I can really add to this. The second one as well, would be quite interested at which kind of environment you photograph it, because as I say, the colors are quite tamed, but maybe that's something what you did and it worked. It's just a different feel, and I think when you put the two pictures next to each other, as a human eye, and definitely for somebody who is untrained, his eyes would go first to the landscape here, and it's because of the colors and everything. I think the colors lacking here. If I would just see the horses, I would be wowed. So both of them works very well. I would be interested on how the picture looked in originally, maybe like a raw file, to see how much colors were there and how much was there to work with. But both of them pretty well. Maybe I would try different crops again, but it really depends how the picture looked originally when it comes to the horses here. Everything looks natural, so nothing to add there. Overall editing very well. So David, well done, great pictures, keep going. It's just a little details and just kind of sometimes even just a lack of being at the right place at the right time. Talking about the horses, if they would be running towards the sunset, obviously it's a different story, but well done to you. Moving on to the next photographer, his name is Jeff Kudla, and we're going to look at his pictures right here. So for Jeff, actually we have 3 pictures, just to kind of see the different styles. Jeff sent us actually lots of other pictures, and I just kind of picked the ones which I thought were the best and worked really well. I could see that you do some kind of additional editing to it, maybe a little bit of a sky replacements and other stuff, which I'm perfectly fine with. I actually really like photographers being creative, so well done on that. And looking at the pictures themselves, so let's go through it. Obviously we have 3 kind of landscape photos here, with I think this one's from the selection being the best. So talking about the technical part of the picture, everything seemed to be sharp and well done. I don't know about the situation, but for example for this one, little longer exposure would maybe remove all the kind of wrinkles on the water, but still very well done. Everything seemed to be in the right focal length, and the exposure as well. Here as well, same thing. Obviously looking at the kind of light and everything, it seems to be that maybe this picture was kind of captured during the kind of daylight, when the light was just a little bit more harsh, but I'm not sure, it's just that's the way it looks. And then a really lovely kind of night landscape here with the mountains and with the stars above it. Again, the sharpness seems to be really well, exposure is fine, and obviously you use a natural light. So on technical bit, the pictures looks good to me, with this one being my favorite, Jeff. Moving on to the artistic part. So again, this one super well. Again, I'm a big fan of reflection as a part of my composition. I think it works very well. I wasn't there, so I'm not sure about the situation, but I can say that if you would remove the wrinkles, it would make it look even cooler, but sometimes the nature doesn't work that way. Still, very well done here, even with the reflection of the sky. This picture is great. Moving on to the artistic part here, I like the picture because I think out of the other ones, it looked the most natural with the sky and everything. But when it comes to artistic composition, I don't think it works that well. I think the foreground is a little bit busy and it takes away from the attention from the rest of the picture. I'm not sure what the situation was, how you could move around and maybe kind of try to get rid of this and use the river as a foreground. That would be my suggestion. And sometimes the way it works is we like it with our eyes, but really when it comes to photography, it cannot be captured. That's just how it is. And maybe it can be just captured for yourself and for your own kind of private gallery or private library. But the foreground doesn't work for me, but the rest of it is fine. In some way, I actually like the contrast of the green and orange, so well done on that there. This picture is my second favorite. I'm a huge fan of the astrophotography, night photography, or the comp side, however you made it. It just works very well. I think the composition, the leading lines of the mountains, and the fact that you left the composition as a kind of halfway, you kind of cut the picture in the middle using 50% of the sky and 50% of the landscape works really well. You could try to kind of push the things and see if maybe the composition rule of the thirds, to see if maybe the 2/3 of the sky and 1/3 of the land, or the other way around, if it would work differently. But still very well done, Jeff. I think you're doing great. Nothing really wrong about the artistic part. Just kind of think maybe more about the foreground. Personally, landscape photographer, I sell pictures all over the world, and I photograph every continent there is, and I know that the foreground element is the hardest to find. And second, some scenes and some places just don't work. That's how it is. And yes, we can photograph it and then try to explain to somebody that there wasn't foreground element, but that's just not how it goes. So some pictures work, some pictures doesn't. Well done on this one. Really love it, Jeff. Well done to you. So moving, the next photographer we have in front of us is called John Lister, and John actually sent us just one photo. The other one isn't edited. So looking at the one photo, I really like it because it reminds me of a place I used to live at. I lived on the Isle of Skye in Scotland, and the landscape looked very similar with the kind of similar colors and features. So I like it a lot, and I like this picture a lot. So let's have a look at the technical part. If we just look at the kind of sharpness, everything look nicely in focus. I think in this scene, what you want is you really want to use either like a focus stacking or really high f-stop, because you want to have pretty much everything in focus, maybe not the sky, but everything else. So it works well here. The exposure looks great. I really like at the back the kind of details on the mountains and the golden color. So well done on that one. So technical part, perfect. Moving on the artistic part. I don't know how much more you could do with the road, because I think it would bring a really nice leading line to add it to the composition, but sometimes that's just not how it works. Using this kind of bit as a foreground element works, but obviously there are stronger elements than this if you would find one, and that's why I'm kind of thinking about the road, but I never been at this place. I don't know where it is, so I don't know what you could do. Obviously then the kind of middle ground and background with the mountains and sky works really well here. I would be quite interested to see what was the original photo, to then judge if you could do different crop or different kind of focus. But in overall, great. I think you photographed the scene at a great time of the day. Obviously we're talking probably about kind of golden hour, sunset, sunrise, so it's really nice. The sky is beautiful. I'm big fan of the skies, and especially the kind of sunset or golden hour sky when there are clouds and the sun is hitting them, and they bring a different color, and the picture in general just works really well. It's really nicely stepped as well, because you start from the kind of cold orange on each side, and then you're moving towards the orange and the kind of focus and the main subject in the middle. So artistically, the message is clear. It works very well. Well done on there. Now, when it comes to post-processing, nothing to say. I would probably edit it exactly the same way. The white balance is there the way it should be. Again, you didn't go overboard with the kind of warmth. You kept it nice and cool, and then just add the warmth where it's supposed to be. Everything is in focus. The cropping is well, knowing the fact that I don't know how the picture looked originally, so I can't really say much more about that. Overall editing, well done. And John, well done on this picture. Thank you very much for sending it to us. Moving to next, we have a Karol here. So from Karol, we got the two pictures. 1 and 2, and yeah, we're talking probably about some kind of forest with a lovely lake right there. I'm assuming it's from the kind of similar location, and we start straight from the technical part. So everything seems to be in focus. Let's have a look. Yep, everything at the back and forth. Let's see if we have any kind of details. Yeah, you shot it with the Nikon, and 24 to 70 you use, let's have a look, 24mm f16 80-second, also a long exposure. I'm very impressed by your detail in the actual trees and the grass. Maybe you done a little bit of blending in Photoshop, I don't know, but either way it works very well. Let's have a look at the other one, and yep, same thing, similar kind of idea. Let's have a look at the yeah, it's 1 of the 13 of the second, so you still have a very nice kind of slow exposure in the water and the details, so well done on that. So technically the exposure is there, sharpness is there, well done on that one. Moving on to artistic part, I completely get the idea. Again, I am a huge fan of the reflection, but it doesn't 100% work for me, and the reason is that I get on this picture how you kind of focusing on the reflection, but I think it gets a bit confusing for the viewer as we don't have the rest of the trees there. So I think that's a little bit of a shame. Also the foreground, or what seems to be the foreground, is a bit kind of cropped away. So I think that's a little bit of a shame. I think I would either go much more in of the picture and just kind of do 2 steps forward, use the reflection as my foreground, and focus on this little like a whatever, this little structure at the back and more of the reflection of the grass. Or I would see if I can step back and use the trees and maybe this lower bit as my foreground, and don't confuse the actual viewer. If you would have the trees, at least those 3, if you could see all of them and then to see the reflection, I think for the viewer it would be much easier to recognize what's happening on the scene, and maybe it would work just a little bit better. Moving on the next one, I think this one is better. I think shame for both of the pictures that you didn't kind of level them. It just seems they tilting both of them, which is a little bit of a shame. But I think here you can clearly see what I'm trying to say when I'm talking about leaving the space to then add more into the viewer's experience. So right here, obviously we got reduce of this kind of foreground here, and we're using the reflection as our main subject, as our foreground, middle ground. So it works really well here. Full reflection, lovely sky. I think this is kind of on a border with high frequency kind of elements, and means that when there is a high frequency, it started to get a little bit of disturbing for the viewer, but I think this is just about enough to get away with it. Again, lovely slow exposure. So if I would have to choose between the 2, I prefer this one, simply because the message is much clearer, but still both of them, the idea is there, and again, it's about being more creative, cropping, doing few step forwards, few step backs, and seeing what works the best. And then finally the post-processing, as I say, I would be quite interested to see how you, for example, created this one, because we saw that it's like 80-90 seconds, yet lots of the trees and the grass is in focus. So my guess would be that you kind of blend it, that you capture 2 and blend them in Photoshop. If not, then it would have to be super silent and have no wind at all, but still you done very well. When it comes to the white balance, I think it's more on the green side, but then it would be interesting to know what kind of weather and light you had when you were capturing this picture. It's a lot of green. It's a kind of almost like a Hobbit and fantasy world. It works. It's bit contrasty to me, but still very cool. The cropping, again, like we were talking, you could go closer or further and see what you could do from there. Here again, because we have the green and then we add a little bit of the warmth in the sky at the back of the trees, it works a little bit better. So you see how I'm kind of trying to guide and lean towards this picture, because yeah, there is just a little bit more to it. I think, you know, the reflection is there in fully, the colors are there, the white balance is there, And again, I think the only kind of shame for this picture is that it's tilting on the side, so I would try to see if there is maybe one of the tools in Photoshop or Lightroom you can use to kind of make sure that everything is straight for you there. Also, when it comes to reflection, just a tip, personally I really like when the kind of line between the two reflection is right in the middle of the picture, because then it gives a clear message. You get your 50-50 composition and it works super well. But still, thank you very much. Great pictures and great effort. Keep going, Karol. Next thing, we moving to Kishan, and we actually not gonna spend much time here because this picture is really confusing, and I was looking if I can find some details about it. Yeah, it was captured by Nikon D 3500, and I actually had this camera before, and you can do so much better than this. I think the time of the day is it's a wrong choice for the time of the day. Obviously there is like a foreground which is really confusing, the view is confusing, the editing isn't really done that well, and Kishan, I think you have to take the camera and try a little bit further. If you need some hints and tips when it comes to landscape photography, I have a friend which is called Serge Rameli. He has an excellent YouTube channel if you want to go for the free content. I learned lots of my stuff from him, and I definitely suggest to check him. His website is photosearch.com. Also, if you would want to invest in a little bit of your photography, go ahead and check his website for the landscape masterclass, which was actually the first photography class I ever bought online, and I did the whole thing, and it really pushed me all the way to the point when I could start to sell my photos. So Kishan, definitely check it out. Again, photosearch.com, and his landscape masterclass is a great product, and it would really help you to move forward. I'm sorry I can't do more about you on your picture. Moving to Michal M. We have one picture from him, and actually I really like this picture. It's my kind of style. I think a really strong foreground element with great leading lines bringing us towards the town. It works really well. Shame that we shared it over the Facebook, so obviously lots of the kind of details and lots of information about the picture disappeared that way, but still, Michael, I think you've done great. I really like the picture. Let's have a look at the technical part. Obviously everything is in focus, talking about the foreground and the background. Again, we lose a little bit with the kind of Facebook, but well done there. The exposure is more on the dark side, which I would be again interested to see the picture in higher resolution to then see how much details you kept in some parts of the picture. Obviously there is kind of quite strong dodge and burn here at this part of the picture, and then on the houses, so again you're sending clear message, but technically very well done. You use lovely natural light. It would be interesting to know at what time of the day you capture this, but great there. Moving on the artistic part, yeah, great. With these kind of foreground elements, you only wish one thing, and that's the the kind of main subject, which are your houses, would be a little bit more in balance with the foreground, because really when you look at the foreground, which takes almost 2/3 or half of the picture, then the houses gets really small. There are different techniques how you can kind of work with it, talking about using different lens or then working with it in Photoshop. It depends how far you really want to go to, and maybe just think about that. As obviously if you would print this on like a big picture and put it on your wall, for the viewers, nothing wrong with that, but this part of the photo would take lots of attention away. Moving on the subject again, I love the leading lines. I think clear foreground is something what really makes landscape photography work, and you made it work, so well done on that. Post-processing, again, one thing is the dark parts, and it's really difficult to judge it on the picture of this resolution. Not your fault, but that's a one thing. So there is lots of really dark parts. I think the sky as well, I would be looking maybe at different crop, and simply because there are clouds here and everything works super well, and then we get almost like a 1/4 of the picture which is just a gradient, and it's just a shame for the viewer. I think you have an incredible scene here, and I would be looking at ways of how you maybe can crop it just a little bit differently to get the most out of this picture. But in general, Michael, well done, great picture. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. And then next landscape photographer is called Motsumi, and we have two pictures from him or her. Obviously one in black and white, one in golden, and we jump straight into the technical part of the photo. So right here, if we check for the sharpness, everything seems to be fine here. Moving on the actual tree, you can see straight from here, everything is sharp and in focus, which almost in this case is a shame, because it would be nice to kind of create separation between the foreground and the background. But yep, it's all there. Talking about the exposure, it seems to be all good. Lovely colors. If we would get a raw file, we would be more able to say how much of the details was really kept into the sun. But I think it's just about on the border of saying that it maybe looks burned out there. So it would be interesting to know what exposure you use. 1/320 of a second, 3.5 f-stop. Yeah, again, if you would send us a raw file, we would be able to say more. Here, as you use black and white, a bit more difficult to say when it comes to exposure, but everything looks all right for me there. So technical part, I think well done, just with the question mark over the sun. Moving on the artistic part, yeah, this I really like. Again, if you would work on it a little bit further, and instead of f16 maybe use something like f4 or even lower, I think it would really pop out the main subject of the picture. Here, what I'm not a huge fan of is the foreground, because really anybody who's going to look at it with a general view, they're going to think it's a mess. You know, it's a kind of obviously it's a part of the lake, and people walk there, so it's a bit messy. And I think when you would print this would be a huge part of your photo. It would be maybe 1/4 of your photo, and it would really take lots of attention away. So I don't know if you could use like a vignette or something to kind of remove the attention from here and shift the eye and the focus of the eyes on the boat and on the sky, which is very lovely. So on this picture, I really like the sky. I'm a huge fan of the sunset, sunrise, golden hour, and when there is a really nice dramatic sky, I think it works really well. I think the boat in a tree is a lovely idea. Just the foreground, again, it's not a picture you would print on the wall, because this wouldn't work for you. Talking about this picture right here, if there would be the right focal length or the separation of the foreground and background, I think it works really well. I would be even looking at different crops to see if maybe like a portrait, just kind of removing the different parts away is great. And then I would be interesting, what was the story of the picture, how you capture it, to see why you decided to turn it black and white, because it's a lovely picture and it would be just interesting to know more about it. And then moving on to post-processing. So here, I think the white balance is well done here. I don't know what you could do with the highlights to maybe keep more details into the sun, because again, looking at it with this size, it just looks touch burn. I think the picture otherwise looks very natural, so well done on that. The overall editing is quite well done here. Everything is straight the way I would like it. Same here. I'm not sure about the horizon. I think it's tilting a little bit, and that's one thing I'm just a little bit sad about. I think you have a little bit of sensor dust here, maybe something to look at. And generally for the future, I would just suggest you, when you send your picture for reviews, do not use the signature or the watermark there. It just takes the attention away from the photographer who's trying to review the pictures. For example, here, it's really kind of leaving over the foreground, and it's just a huge shame. But in general, thank you very much for sending us your pictures. Well done, and just keep going forward. And the final landscape photographer is called Slavko. Slavko, I know you send us a lot of pictures, and I really was able to choose only 2. And technically and artistically, there is a huge difference between those 2. This one is really more of a style of taking a picture with your mobile phone. Why I'm saying it is, the background is cut off. I can see your shadow in the water. It's not really balanced still the right way neither. So I'm not going to look at this picture any further, because really this is it's like a snapshot, you know. You take your phone, you go out, you take a picture, and this is what you get. So we move on the next one, and that is much more interesting. Obviously, absolutely stunning scene here, beautiful landscape. Again, let's see if we have any details. We don't, but it's a shame. It's a lovely, lovely panorama. So let's look at the technical part from what we can see. Let's see if we can see some details, not from this share, but still everything looks in kind of focus from the view we are looking at it. I really like that there are like a details of the villages and the river, and it's all good there. The exposure seems to be fine to me as well. Obviously lovely natural light with the sky here. Well done there. Moving on the artistic part, the composition is great. You're using the kind of rule of third, where you're using 1/3 for your sky and 2/3 for your land, so it's looking great. I love the kind of leading line of the river. I love the panorama. I love the message. I think artistically this picture is really well done, and well done on that. Then moving on to post-processing, it's difficult to say because you deliver it like this and the quality of the picture isn't that great, but I'm not 100% sure about the white balance, because it looks like you have golden hour happening here, but everything seems to be moving towards green. So I don't know, a little bit of magenta, a little bit of warmth would help. Also to create additional contrast between the green land and the actual sunset happening. I also think when it comes to kind of dodge and burn or contrast, there are parts of the pictures like here, where it gets really, really dark, and I would be interested to see how is it on the original picture. Just kind of make sure that you don't burn your details away even in the dark areas. I think us as a photographers, we focus a lot on the bright areas, or on the kind of white parts, to make sure that we don't burn them, and not enough on the dark parts where exactly the same thing can happen. Just so keep an eye on this contrast. But otherwise, really well done. It's a beautiful scene, and well done on this picture. So thank you very much for sharing it with us. And we are moving on, now moving towards the macro photographers. We have 4 of them here, and just before we jump to them, I just wanted to tell you and give you a little inspiration to check out the YouTube channel of the Adobe Creative Cloud and search for Photography Masterclass from Michael White. And there's a about 1 hour long class called How to Photograph Small Objects. I think if you're just starting with macro photography or small object photography, this is absolutely brilliant. It's for free. You can just open it there, and really it's something worth to check. Also, he does lots of editing in Lightroom and Photoshop, and something to kind of check. So going back to the Lightroom, first one from Andreia. So we have a picture here. Only one picture, unfortunately, but still super lovely. Technically, really well done. I'm a big fan of macro photography where you leave quite a bit of the picture in focus. I think too many times people just try to focus on the smallest part of the picture, and then everything else is blurred, and I think it just gets confusing. I think this is a clear message and is well done. So the sharpness is great here. The exposure is well done. It would be interesting to know at what time of the day did you photograph this, but it's lovely. The color is lovely. Obviously, either using natural light or some other light, it just works here. So well done on the technical part of the photo. Artistic wise, it just works, you know, square crop where it seems where it meant to be, and in this case it works really well. Clearly the flower in the foreground is your main element, the main message, and it works very well. Just really nicely spring or kind of early summer looking picture with lovely colors. Nothing really to add here. You've done very well on the artistic part. Again, I really love the fact that your main subject is in focus and not just this kind of flower here and then everything else is blurred. I think when it comes to macro photography, you really need to work with the depth of field there, because I think too many people these days just focus on the smallest part, and then you have this kind of entire picture then in blurred, which works from time to time, but not on everything and not by default. So well done on the artistic part as well. And that post-processing, I think, because it's obviously shared by Facebook, it's a bit difficult for me to judge the post-processing completely, especially because I think I think the white balance is more on the green side. I think I would add a little bit more warmth to it because obviously there is a lot of green already, and then when the greens start to pop out even in the yellow, it really kind of removes some of the contrast. So I think that's a little bit of a shame, but other than that, everything is well. It would be interesting to see if you could add a little bit stronger vignette, but some is there already and it works well. So all in all, great job. I would love to see more of your pictures, so if you have a time, send them over to us for the next week or for the next reviews, because this is a really cool picture and well done on that. Moving on, the next macro photographer, his name is Lee, and so we have obviously a different crop here, and we have another flower here, and I think in some way this is what I was just talking about. I think when you have your main subject, which is the flower here, obviously, the key for me would be to try to see if I can keep everything in focus, even including the part of the flower right here, because I think for human eye, you wouldn't be just looking at this, you would be looking at the whole part, so it gets confusing. And I think the depth of the field where everything is blurred except the tiny pieces of the picture are a bit overused now these days, so something just to kind of look at. But in general, let's look at the technical part. The parts which are in focus and they look great. Let's have a look if we have some details. Yeah, you use a Sony and it's 1/500 of a second, f2.8. That's the reason why other bits are not in focus. 32 millimeters. Yeah, it's lovely. Obviously lovely exposure. I think everything, all the details are there. There is a lovely light coming from the top, and there is even a little bit of like a lens flare, so lovely things there. Moving on the artistic part, the composition is actually very nice. There are some kind of elements at the back which help with the scene and helps to make it even more interesting. The whole thing create lovely leading line. The subject is clear with what I'm saying earlier, that this part should be in focus for me. But in general, I think if it would be in focus, this is a picture I could easily imagine printing on something or having it printed on a wall, because it just looks lovely. So lovely effort there for the artistic part. And then finally for the post-processing, I think everything is great. I think the white balance is lovely here. I think the crop is nice. I think it works for the scene. I think it creates a little bit here. Maybe I would try to remove these parts at the bottom because they are just a bit confusing. You know, I don't like when there are elements just kind of left over and you can't really say what they are. So I think that's just one little thing I would add to it. But in general, super cool, well done, and thank you very much for sharing your picture with us. Moving on to the next one, our friend Martin. So Martin, I think, sent us a picture last week, so thank you very much, and thank you for joining us again with this picture of the sunflower. Stunning work once again. The season is just about coming, or maybe just about finishing on the sunflowers. I think the photography of them is great, and this is a lovely idea of how to do it. I think in last episode I was sharing a kind of masterclass for Joel. From Joel Grimes, he has a lovely picture of how to photograph still life, something similar to this. I will post it under this video so you can check it out if it's something what you would be interested in. But let's jump straight to it. Obviously the sharpness is there, the exposure looks great, and it would be interesting what kind of light you use, still light, flash, whatever you did, it just works here. Moving on the artistic part, it's great. Obviously the crop is what it is. This is probably more kind of prepared for your Instagram. It would be interesting to see if you would kind of make it like a square and have the flower like a completely disappear, but in this way it creates kind of a mystery for the viewer, so it works well as well. Either way, I think it's great. I think the process of from the idea to bring it to this is well executed, and once again you done great job, so very well done, loving it. Moving on to post-processing, the white balance is great, moving from the green on the sides into the yellow with enough details left on the flower for us to kind of see them. And again, the cropping is great, depends on again what is it used for. Probably if you would be printing it out, you would maybe work with it differently, but super well done. Thank you very much for sending us another picture, and I hope to see more of your work in the future. And finally, for this part, the last macro photographer, San Yu. So let's have a look. The reason why we put him in macro photography is because he sent us two pictures, and I think this one is clearly a macro photography, the one before edit, after edit. And then obviously we have this picture of the boy where you use the racket. To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of this picture. Just out of the whole feeling, obviously the boy, the white balance, the kind of like a cage looking feel to it is not my kind of thing. Obviously, yeah, the sharpness is there, the exposure is there. I think the white balance isn't perfect, and from the artistic feel, I think when it comes to kids and everything, I think you could do other things, because also when you look at him, you can see that he's all cool and probably coming back from school or whatever, and then you move at the picture itself and it's sending like a message of being in jail and stuff. So it just doesn't work for me. I'm sorry. But moving on to macro photography and the macro part of it, great edit. I think looking at it, I can see that you use focal length of 2.4 on your original photo here before editing, and then when you move on the actual editing, you done some other stuff we're going to talk about during the post-processing. But starting from the beginning, the sharpness, saying that the flower is your main element, is all there, including the kind of parts around. So as I mentioned earlier, well done on that. Exposure is well, and with the natural light, well done on there. Moving on the artistic bit, yeah, the message is clear. It's the flower. Well done on there. I just think that maybe the crop could have been a little bit differently. If you're using something as strong as this, it should be perfectly centered and maybe even more in focus, especially when you then go and blur the leaves, just saying to the viewer they don't have to be there. So I would crop it a little bit further, but subject is there, so artistically it's a strong message. Well done. And then moving on to post-processing, you done fair bit. I think it's a shame that obviously you have everything in focus, so the depth of field didn't work really for you, because I can see that on a post-processing you're trying to kind of remove that. It works. It's just that if you wouldn't send me the original, I wouldn't know about it. So it's just kind of showing your cards to another player, but it's fine. Here it's much stronger. The flower is there and the main focus goes there. I think the white balance is more on a green part or a green side, which makes me think that maybe the light condition wasn't the best. Maybe there wasn't enough warmth in the actual light, but in general, it is very lovely picture. I think the editing is well done. I would do slightly tighter crop and make sure the flower is centered. And other than that, thank you very much for sending us your photo. So that's this part where we were looking at landscape and macro photographers. Thank you to all the photographers for joining us this week. And again, if you have time, make sure you join us for next episode and the next photography review session next week.